In the cold aisles of a Baltimore grocery store, a young black girl stood trembling with her baby brother crying against her chest. Maya Johnson was 6, but desperation had aged her beyond those years. When the millionaire in the tailored suit walked past, she did something that would haunt her forever. She begged. Not for charity, but for a chance to repay him someday with the only currency she possessed. A promise whispered through tears. What she didn't know was that this moment would expose a secret that would leave everyone speechless. This is the story of how the poorest girl in Baltimore became someone no one saw coming. What would you do if a desperate child asked you for help? Maya Johnson moved through the streets of East Baltimore like a ghost, her presence so unremarkable that even the security cameras seemed to look past her. At 6 years old, she had mastered the art of invisibility. Head down, shoulders hunched, her oversized green sweater swallowing her tiny frame. Her dark skin bore the ashen undertone of exhaustion, and her tightly coiled black hair was pulled back in uneven pigtails she had done herself that morning. She carried her baby brother Micah on her hip with a determination that defied physics, a 1-year-old's weight against a 6-year-old's frame. Her thin arms had developed a wiry strength from necessity, from being the only one left to carry him. The grocery store on Charles Street was her last hope today. She had walked 2 miles with Micah, stopping every few blocks when her arms screamed for rest. Her stomach had been empty for 2 days now, surviving on water from public fountains and the crackers she had saved for Micah. But he had finished those yesterday, and now his cries came in waves. Hunger mixed with the discomfort of a diaper she couldn't change because she had run out of supply. Maya's fingers traced the worn photograph in her pocket. Her mother, in a chef's uniform, standing proud in front of a restaurant that had burned down just months ago. The image was all she had left, besides Micah and the memories. She didn't look like someone who had spent every day of her 6 years at her mother's side in professional kitchens, learning by observation what others studied in culinary schools. She didn't look like someone who could identify herbs by scent alone, who understood the science of emulsification before she could read the word. She just looked like another abandoned child from the projects, too young to be carrying a baby, too small to be alone. The grocery store workers had seen her before, hovering near the entrance, never quite brave enough to go inside. Today was different. Micah's cries had taken on a quality that terrified her, weaker, more desperate, the kind of sound that meant his little body was starting to give up. Maya knew that sound. She had heard it in the days after their mother died, when she had hidden them both in the abandoned apartment, terrified that child services would separate them. She had kept him quiet then, with the last of their food. Now there was nothing left to give him except promises she couldn't keep, and love that couldn't fill his stomach. 3 months ago, Maya Johnson's world had shattered in a kitchen fire that took everything. Their mother, Diane Johnson, had been working the late shift at her restaurant. Not the famous one where she had made her name, but the small soul food place she had opened in their neighborhood. The fire started in the electrical system, ancient wiring that the landlord had promised to fix. It spread fast, too fast. Diane Johnson had gotten the other workers out, then gone back for the cash register, the weekend's earnings that would have paid their rent. She never came back out. Maya had been watching from their apartment window, Micah sleeping in her arms. She saw the flames light up the night sky, saw her mother's silhouette in the doorway before the smoke swallowed everything. The firefighters said Diane had been a hero, saving 3 lives. But heroes didn't pay rent or buy formula. Heroes left behind 2 children with no family, no money, and nowhere to go. The restaurant had no insurance, another corner cut to make ends meet. The other relatives were gone, drugs, violence, or simply disappeared into the system's cracks. The social worker had come the next morning, a tired woman with kind eyes who spoke about foster homes and separation as if they were discussing the weather. Maya had hidden with Micah in the closet, staying silent until the woman left. She knew what foster care meant. She had heard the stories from other kids in the building. They would take Micah somewhere safe, maybe, but away from her, and she was all he had left, the only person who knew that he liked to be rocked side to side, not up and down, that he would only sleep if she hummed their mother's favorite song. For 3 months, they had survived on their mother's teachings, not just about cooking, but about resourcefulness. Maya had sold everything valuable in the apartment, stretched every dollar until it screamed. She had learned which restaurants threw out food that was still good, which churches served meals without asking questions. But a 6-year-old could only be so resourceful. The money ran out. The landlord changed the locks, and now they lived in doorways and abandoned buildings, Maya keeping them moving so no one would notice a child raising a baby. She had kept one thing from their old life: the notebook where her mother had written her recipes. Not just ingredients and instructions, but stories. Why she added honey to cornbread, her grandmother's secret. How to balance heat with sweet, life lessons disguised as cooking tips. Maya had memorized every page, whispered the recipes to Micah like bedtime stories. In her mind, she could still cook every dish, still smell the garlic and onions hitting hot oil, still hear her mother's voice guiding her hands. But minds couldn't feed bodies, and memories couldn't buy milk. Now, standing in this grocery store with Micah's weight pulling at her shoulders, Maya felt the crushing reality of their situation. She was 6 years old, carrying a 1-year-old, with no money, no home, and no one coming to save them. The photograph in her pocket felt like evidence of another life. One where she had stood on a step stool beside her mother, learning to fold dumplings with hands barely bigger than the wonton wrappers. Where had that life gone? How had they fallen so far, so fast? The dairy aisle stretched before Maya like an impossible distance. Her legs shook from exhaustion and hunger, but she forced herself forward. A woman with a full cart glanced at them, her face cycling through surprise, pity, and suspicion. "Where's your mother, sweetie?" she asked, the sweetie sounding more like an accusation. Maya had learned to lie smoothly. "She's coming, she just asked me to get milk." The woman's eyes narrowed, taking in Maya's dirty clothes, Micah's obvious distress. She pushed her cart away quickly, muttering something about calling security. Maya's heart hammered. Security meant questions, meant adults who would take Micah away. She moved deeper into the store, trying to look purposeful, like she belonged, but a 6-year-old with a baby belonged nowhere in this world of abundance. She passed shelves stocked with food that might as well have been behind museum glass for all she could access it. The formula aisle made her want to cry. $23 for a can that would last maybe 4 days. She had 23 cents in her pocket, found on the sidewalk that morning. An elderly man was examining the milk selection, his clothes neat and pressed, his movements unhurried. Maya approached him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, sir, my baby brother is hungry. Could you help us buy some milk? I promise I'll pay you back when I grow up. I'll cook for you. My mama taught me to cook real good." The words tumbled out, mixing truth with desperation. The man's face went through several expressions before settling on discomfort. "I'm sorry, I can't help you," he said, backing away as if poverty might be contagious. A store employee had noticed the interaction, a young woman with a manager's badge who approached with professional concern. "Is everything okay here?" she asked the man, not Maya. "This child was asking for money," he replied, relief evident that someone else would handle the situation. The manager turned to Maya, her smile fixed and cold. "Sweetie, where are your parents?" That word again, sweetie, that adults used when they were about to do something you wouldn't like. Maya tried to edge away, but the manager followed. "I need you to come with me. We'll call someone to help you." Help? Maya knew what that help looked like. It looked like Micah in one foster home and her in another. It looked like never seeing him again, never being able to tell the new people that he was allergic to strawberries, that he needed his special blanket to sleep. "We're fine," Maya said, trying to sound older than 6. "Our mom is outside," but her voice cracked, and Micah chose that moment to wail, a sound of pure infant misery that echoed through the store. More employees appeared, surrounding them with the efficiency of people handling a problem. Security arrived, 2 guards who looked at Maya with a mixture of pity and procedure. "Come on, little one," the older guard said, his voice not unkind. "Let's go somewhere safe and figure this out." Safe. Another lie adults told. Maya had learned that safe was relative, that sometimes the most dangerous thing was trusting the wrong person with your safety. As they escorted her toward the office, Maya caught sight of the bread aisle. Loaves stacked in abundance, any one of which could have fed them for days. She thought of her mother's homemade bread, how the apartment would fill with the scent of yeast and possibility. How her mother would let her punch down the dough, teaching her about patience and the magic of transformation. Now she was being transformed too, from a sister trying to survive into a case number, a problem to be processed. Other shoppers watched their procession with expressions Maya had learned to read. Disgust from some, what kind of mother lets a child that young care for a baby? Pity from others, those poor children, what a shame. But no one intervened. No one asked Maya what she needed or wanted. She was 6 years old, invisible until she became inconvenient, voiceless except when begging. The automatic doors of the manager's office closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like a prison cell locking. Inside the office, they tried to separate her from Micah. "We need to check if he's okay," the manager explained, reaching for him. Maya's arms tightened instinctively. "No!" The word came out as almost a scream. "He needs me. He won't stop crying without me." And it was true. The moment someone else tried to hold him, Micah's cries escalated to shrieks. He knew Maya's smell, her heartbeat, the particular way she held him that meant safety in a world that had taken everything else away. The manager backed off, making phone calls instead. Maya caught fragments. 2 children, no parent present. The older one can't be more than 6. Each word was a nail in the coffin of their life together. Maya pressed her face against Micah's head, breathing in his baby smell, memorizing it. "I'm sorry," she whispered to him. "I tried. I promised Mama I'd take care of you, but I don't know how." He grabbed her finger in his tiny fist, holding on as if he understood that their time was running out. Through the office window, Maya could see the store continuing its normal rhythm. Shoppers filled their carts, checked their phones, lived their lives, unaware that in this small room, a family was being destroyed. She thought of all the kitchens her mother had worked in, all the people she had fed, all the reviews that had praised her gift. None of it mattered now. You could be a genius with flavors, an artist with ingredients, but if you died poor, your children still went hungry. Talent didn't pay bills. Dreams didn't buy formula. The police arrived 40 minutes later, not in a confrontational way, but with the casual efficiency of people collecting lost property. A female officer knelt beside Maya, trying to appear non-threatening. "Hi there, I'm Officer Kim. What's your name?" Maya stayed silent, knowing that names led to databases, databases led to records, records led to separation. "We're here to help," Officer Kim continued. "But we need to know where you live, where your family is." Family. The word almost made Maya laugh. Family was a mother who died saving strangers. Family was a 1-year-old who depended on a 6-year-old for survival. Family was a photograph worn thin from handling and recipes memorized like prayers. "She's coming," Maya lied one more time. "Our mom is coming." But even she could hear how hollow it sounded, how impossible. No one was coming. No one had been coming for 3 months. As they prepared to leave, to take them to wherever children without parents went, Maya made one last desperate attempt. She pulled out her mother's recipe notebook, holding it out to the officer. "I can cook," she said, her voice urgent. "My mama taught me everything. I can work. I can pay for things. Just please don't take him away from me, please." The officer's expression softened, but her actions didn't change. Rules were rules, systems were systems, and 6-year-olds didn't get to keep babies, no matter how well they could cook. They let Maya carry Micah to the police car, a small mercy in a merciless situation. As they drove away from the grocery store, she pressed her face to the window, watching the world blur past. Somewhere in this city was the burned remains of her mother's restaurant. Somewhere were the customers who had praised her mother's food but hadn't come to her funeral. Somewhere was the life they should have had if electrical wiring had been up to code, if health insurance had been affordable, if talent had been enough to protect them from tragedy. The abandoned bus shelter on North Avenue looked different from the back of a police car, less like refuge and more like evidence of their desperation. They had slept there 2 nights ago, Maya keeping Micah warm with her body heat and a tattered blanket she had found. Now they were heading somewhere, with heat and beds and regular meals, but without each other. The system would provide everything except what mattered most, keeping them together. Maya pulled out the photograph of her mother one last time before they reached the station. In the picture, Diane Johnson stood, proud and confident, unaware that in 3 years she would be dead, that her daughter would be begging for milk in grocery stores, that her baby would know hunger before he knew words. But she was smiling, holding a plate of her signature dish, proof that she had existed, that she had created beauty in a world that would ultimately destroy her. "I'm sorry, Mama," Maya whispered to the photograph. "I wasn't strong enough. I couldn't keep us together." Micah stirred in her arms, making the soft sounds that meant he was drifting towards sleep. At least he wouldn't remember this. The hunger, the fear, the moment when his sister couldn't save him. He would grow up somewhere else, maybe somewhere better, but without the stories of their mother's recipes, without knowing that he came from greatness, that the world had failed to recognize. The police station loomed ahead, all concrete and fluorescent lights, and the end of everything. Maya thought about running. She was small, fast, knew the city's hiding places, but she was also exhausted, hungry, and carrying a baby who needed more than she could give. So she sat still, holding Micah close, whispering their mother's recipes like prayers. First you brown the meat until it smells like heaven. Then you add the Holy Trinity, onions, celery, bell peppers. You let them sweat until they're soft, until they give up all their flavors. Each word was a goodbye, a legacy she was trying to pass on in the few minutes they had left. The car stopped, doors opened. Hands reached for them, gentle but insistent, and Maya Johnson, 6 years old, holder of her mother's culinary genius, protector of her baby brother, finally ran out of fight. She let them take Micah. His cries cutting through her like knives. She let them lead her inside, where forms would be filled out and decisions would be made by people who didn't know that Micah only slept with his head turned to the right, that he loved sweet potatoes but hated carrots, that their mother had named him after the prophet because she said he would speak truth to power someday. As they separated them, Micah to the infant unit, Maya to the older children's area. She kept her mother's notebook clutched to her chest. It was all she had left, these recipes written in her mother's careful hand. Someday, maybe, she would cook them again. Someday, when she grew up, she would find Micah and make him their mother's gumbo and tell him about the woman who had created magic in kitchens across Baltimore. Someday, she would keep the promise she had made to the stranger in the grocery store, to pay back kindness with cooking. But tonight she was just a 6-year-old girl who had lost everything, holding on to recipes like life rafts in a storm that had already swallowed her whole. The next morning arrived gray and unforgiving in the foster care facility. Maya had spent the night clutching her mother's notebook, unable to sleep without Micah's weight beside her. The other children in the dormitory had their own traumas, their own losses, but none of them were 6 years old carrying the weight of a failed promise. When breakfast came, industrial eggs and toast that would have made her mother weep, Maya couldn't eat. Her stomach, so long empty, had forgotten how to accept fullness. A social worker came to talk to her, a different one from yesterday, this one with tired eyes and too many cases. "Maya, we need to talk about your future," she began, as if a 6-year-old could discuss futures when her present had just shattered. "Your brother is being placed with a family that specializes in infant care. They're good people. He'll be safe." Safe. There was that word again. Safe, but alone. Safe, but without his sister. Safe, but orphaned. In all the ways that mattered. "When can I see him?" Maya asked, though she already knew the answer from the other kids' stories. "We'll see," the social worker said, which meant never, which meant he would grow up calling someone else sister, someone else family. "Right now, we need to focus on finding you a placement, a family that can help you process everything you've been through." Process, like grief was a factory line, like loss could be packaged and shelved and dealt with in therapeutic doses. Days blended into each other in the facility. Maya attended the mandatory school classes where teachers looked at her with surprise when she could read beyond her grade level. Her mother had taught her using recipe books and food magazines. She sat through group therapy where children were encouraged to share their feelings, but how could she explain that her feelings were seasoned with cumin and coriander, that her memory smelled like caramelized onions and fresh thyme? She was grieving in a language no one else spoke. 3 weeks after the grocery store, a couple came to meet her. The Johnstons. No relation, just a cosmic joke of shared names. They had a nice house in the suburbs, steady jobs, excellent references. They talked about stability and opportunity, about the good schools in their district, about the bedroom they had already decorated in pink and purple. They didn't ask about her mother's recipes or whether she knew how to make roux from scratch. They didn't understand that she wasn't just a traumatized 6-year-old, but a keeper of culinary secrets, a guardian of flavors that would die with her if she didn't preserve them. The placement was approved. Maya packed her few belongings, the notebook, the photograph, the clothes donated by well-meaning strangers. The Johnstons picked her up in a minivan that smelled like air freshener and normalcy. As they drove away from the city, away from the neighborhoods where her mother had cooked, away from any chance of finding Micah again, Maya pressed her face to the window and watched Baltimore disappear. Somewhere in that maze of streets was a burned restaurant, a grocery store where she had begged for milk. 1,000 memories of a life that now felt like someone else's dream. The Johnstons' house was everything the system wanted for her. Clean, safe, filled with educational toys and organic snacks. Mrs. Johnston showed her the kitchen, proud of the matching appliances and organized pantry. "Do you like to help with cooking?" she asked, trying to connect. Maya nodded, but didn't mention that she had helped her mother prep for 100 cover services, that she knew the difference between julienne and brunoise, that she could identify the moment when garlic went from raw to fragrant to burnt. This kitchen was for heating, not creating. These people were kind, but they would never understand. That night in her pink and purple room, Maya opened her mother's notebook for the first time since leaving the facility. The recipes blurred through her tears, but she forced herself to read each one, to remember. Tomorrow, the Johnstons would enroll her in school. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of becoming whoever they needed her to be. A good student, a grateful foster child, a success story. But tonight, she was still Diane Johnson's daughter, holder of recipes that had once made Baltimore's elite close their eyes in bliss. Tonight, she made a promise to herself and to Micah, wherever he was, she would remember everything. She would grow up, and one day she would cook again, not just to feed bodies, but to honor their mother, to find her brother, to prove that some gifts survived even the harshest storms. The weeks turned to months in the Johnston house. Maya learned to smile at the right times, to express gratitude for opportunities she hadn't asked for, to excel in school, because it made everyone feel better about the situation. The social workers called her a success story, traumatized but resilient, a testament to the system working. But at night she still whispered recipes to herself like prayers, still dreamed of kitchens filled with steam and purpose, still wondered if Micah remembered her face or just felt an absence where a sister should be. One day Mrs. Johnston found her in the kitchen at 5 a.m, standing on a chair at the stove. She had been trying to make her mother's cornbread from memory, measuring ingredients with the focus of a much older child. The cornmeal was the wrong grind, the buttermilk too thin, but she was trying. Mrs. Johnston's face went through several expressions: surprise, concern, something that might have been fear. "Maya, honey, you could have been hurt. Why didn't you ask for help?" How could Maya explain that this wasn't about help? This was about preservation, about keeping her mother alive in the only way she knew how. This was about promises made to strangers in grocery stores, about paying back a universe that had taken everything with the only currency she had, her mother's genius, filtered through her small hands. But 6-year-olds weren't supposed to have such heavy thoughts, so she just said, "I'm sorry. I wanted to surprise you." Mrs. Johnston hugged her then, and Maya let herself be held. Even though the arms were wrong, the smell was wrong, everything was wrong except the faint scent of cornbread burning in the pan. 8 years passed. Maya grew in the Johnston house like a plant in the wrong soil, alive but not thriving, reaching for sun that wasn't quite the right spectrum. She learned to hide her mother's notebook, to cook only when they were out, to pretend that her skill in home economics class was just natural talent rather than years of training before she could properly hold a knife. The Johnstons loved her in their way, proud of her straight A's and her full scholarship offers, never understanding that she was performing a version of herself that fit their expectations, while the real Maya existed only in stolen moments over a stove. She tried to find Micah, at first openly, asking social workers who gave her pitying looks and explained about closed adoptions and fresh starts. Later, secretly, searching online databases and social media for boys named Micah, born in the right year, looking for their mother's eyes in strangers' faces. But Baltimore had swallowed him as completely as it had swallowed their mother's ashes. He was out there somewhere, maybe loved, maybe safe, but lost to her in all the ways that mattered. She held on to the hope that he was happy, that his new family cherished him, that somewhere in his DNA he carried their mother's gift, even if he never knew its source. The day she turned 18, Maya aged out of the system that had saved and separated them. The Johnstons offered to let her stay while she attended culinary school. They had finally understood that cooking wasn't just a hobby for her, but a calling written in her bones. But Maya needed to return to Baltimore, to the streets that had shaped her, to the kitchens where her mother's ghost still whispered among the steam. She packed the same items she had carried for 12 years, the notebook now held together with tape, the photograph faded but still precious, and new additions, acceptance letters from culinary programs, scholarship offers. proof that talent could survive even the harshest pruning. Standing in the Baltimore bus station, Maya felt the city settle around her like a familiar coat. It had changed, gentrification pushing out the neighborhoods she knew, new restaurants where old ones had burned. But underneath it was still the place where her mother had created magic, where she had begged for milk, where Micah had been taken from her arms. She had come full circle. But this time she wasn't a desperate child. This time she had skills, purpose, and a promise to keep. She found a tiny apartment near the culinary school, waiting tables at night to supplement her scholarships. In class, instructors were amazed by her knife skills, her intuitive understanding of flavors, her ability to rescue sauces that others would have thrown away. They didn't know she had been trained by a master before she could read, that every technique they taught was just formalization of knowledge written in her muscle memory. She excelled not because she was learning, but because she was finally being allowed to be who she had always been. Diane Johnson's daughter, keeper of recipes that deserved to live again. One evening, while working at an upscale restaurant downtown, she saw him, James Wellington, older now but still carrying himself with the quiet confidence of old money. He was dining alone, reading financial reports between courses, unaware that his server was a ghost from an encounter he had probably forgotten. Maya watched him for 3 shifts before gathering the courage to act. On the 4th night, instead of his ordered dessert, she sent out her mother's deconstructed sweet potato pie, rebuilt from memory and improved by years of secret practice, plated with the precision of someone who had learned that presentation was survival. She watched from the kitchen door as he took the first bite, saw his face change as recognition flickered. He called for the chef, then specifically for whoever had made the dessert. Maya walked out slowly, no longer 6 years old and desperate, but still carrying that child within her. "Mr. Wellington," she said quietly, "I told you I'd pay you back. My name is Maya Johnson. 8 years ago you could have helped a little girl buy milk for her baby brother you walked past. But I made you a promise that day, that I would cook for you when I grew up. My mother was Diane Johnson. She was supposed to open a restaurant called Nourish before she died. This is her dessert. Consider us even." The restaurant had gone silent around them, other diners sensing drama without understanding its source. James Wellington stared at her, this young woman who had emerged from his past like an accusation and a redemption all at once. "The little girl in the grocery store," he said slowly. "You were so young. I'm sorry. I should have helped." Maya felt years of anger and hurt rise up, but she pushed them down. This wasn't about revenge. This was about honoring promises, about proving that kindness rejected could still transform into something beautiful. "I don't need your apology," she said, her voice steady. "I needed your help then. Now, I'm one of the best culinary students in the city. I'm going to open my mother's restaurant one day, and it's going to be everything she dreamed of. I just wanted you to know that the little girl you ignored kept her promise. Some of us do that. Keep promises, even when the world gives us every reason not to." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "Wait," James said, standing. "Let me see what else you can do. Cook for me. Really cook. If you're half as good as that dessert suggests, I want to invest in your future. Not out of guilt, but because talent like that deserves support." Maya considered this unexpected turn. 8 years ago she had begged for milk. Now she was being offered a chance. Life had a strange way of circling back, of offering redemption in unexpected packages. "Dom condition," she said. "I have a brother somewhere in this city. He's 9 now, adopted, probably doesn't even know I exist. If I do this, you help me find him. Not to disrupt his life, just to know he's okay. To maybe, someday, cook for him like I promised our mother I would." James Wellington extended his hand, and Maya shook it. Not as a desperate child, but as a chef, claiming her birthright. The test kitchen he provided was even more elaborate than she had imagined, stocked with ingredients that would have made her mother weep with joy. Maya cooked for 5 hours straight, preparing 7 courses that told the story of her life. From the desperate hunger of childhood to the refined techniques of her training, each dish a chapter in a memoir written in flavors. She cooked like her mother was watching, like Micah was waiting, like every meal she had missed was fueling this one perfect service. When she finished, James Wellington wasn't alone. He had called in food critics, other restaurateurs, people who could recognize genius when it was placed before them. They ate in reverent silence, tasting not just food, but years of sacrifice and determination. Maya stood before them, still wearing the same green sweater style she had favored since childhood, a reminder to herself of where she came from, and watched them understand what her mother had always known, that cooking was about more than technique. It was about translating love into something tangible, about feeding souls as well as bodies. "Ladies and gentlemen," James announced when the last plate was cleared, "meet Maya Johnson, the future of Baltimore dining." Her mother, Diane Johnson, was a legend, cut short. But talent like this doesn't die, it just waits for its moment. I'm honored to announce that I'll be backing the opening of Nourish, Diane Johnson's dream restaurant, with her daughter as head chef. The applause was thunderous, but Maya barely heard it. She was thinking of a 6-year-old girl standing in a grocery store, making promises she couldn't understand, planting seeds that would take years to bloom. Later, alone in the test kitchen, Maya pulled out her mother's notebook one last time. The pages were barely holding together now, the ink faded in places, but every recipe was burned into her memory. She had kept her promise. To the stranger in the grocery store, to her mother, to herself. But one promise remained unfulfilled. Somewhere in Baltimore was a 9-year-old boy who didn't know his sister existed, who didn't know he came from a line of women who could make strangers cry with the perfection of their food. She would find him. Not to take him from whatever family had given him what she couldn't, but to ensure he knew his history, his heritage, the love that had never stopped looking for him. 6 months later, Nourish opened its doors to lines around the block. Food critics who had tasted Diane Johnson's food years ago came to see if the daughter had inherited the gift. They left converted, writing reviews that spoke of resurrection, of talent that transcended tragedy. Maya had insisted on hiring from the neighborhood, former foster kids, single mothers, anyone who understood that a kitchen could be salvation. She trained them the way her mother had trained her, with patience and precision and the understanding that cooking was about more than following recipes. On opening night, she stood in the kitchen her mother had designed but never seen built. The walls held photos of Diane Johnson alongside newspaper clippings about Maya's journey. But the most important photo was tucked in her pocket, as always, worn and precious, a reminder of where this had all begun. The dining room was full of Baltimore's elite, including Brad Thompson, who had unknowingly booked a table at the restaurant run by the girl he had once escorted from his grocery store. Maya prepared his meal personally, each dish a quiet testament to how wrong first impressions could be. As the evening wound down, James Wellington raised a toast to the packed restaurant. "To promises kept," he said, "and to the understanding that sometimes the smallest acts of faith create the most extraordinary outcomes. To Diane Johnson, who lives on in every dish served here. And to Maya Johnson, who turned tragedy into triumph, who kept cooking when the world gave her every reason to stop." The diners applauded, but Maya was looking at table 12, where a 9-year-old boy sat with his adoptive parents, unaware that his reservation had been orchestrated by a sister he didn't remember. She had found him, Micah Williams now, happy and loved by parents who cherished him. His adoptive mother had been resistant at first, fearful of disrupting their son's life. But when Maya had shown her the notebook, explained that she just wanted Micah to know his history without any claim on his present, the woman had relented. They had agreed to this, a meal where Maya could see him, where he could taste his birth mother's food without the weight of revelation. Not yet. Maybe not ever, if it would hurt him. But at least this, one promise kept in the only way possible. Maya watched from the kitchen window as Micah tasted the kids' menu version of their mother's gumbo, saw his face light up with unexpected recognition. Some things were written deeper than memory, in DNA, in the taste buds that knew home even when the mind had forgotten. His adoptive parents exchanged surprised looks as he asked for seconds, then thirds, as he described flavors he shouldn't have known to look for. Maya allowed herself one moment of pure joy before returning to the controlled chaos of service. Later, as the last dishes were cleaned and the staff headed home, Maya stood alone in her mother's dream made real. She pulled out the photograph one more time, but now it felt different. Not a weight or a reminder of loss, but a celebration. "We did it, Mama," she whispered to the image. "Maybe not the way we planned, but we did it. Micah is safe and loved. Your recipes are feeding people again, and that little girl who begged for milk, she kept every promise she made." Through the window, Baltimore's lights sparkled like stars brought to earth. Somewhere out there, a 9-year-old boy was falling asleep with a full stomach and the lingering taste of home on his tongue. Somewhere, the Johnstons were proud of the girl they had raised without fully understanding. Somewhere, other 6-year-olds were learning too young that the world could be cruel. But here, in this kitchen that smelled of hope and second chances, Maya Johnson had proven that sometimes the universe did balance its books. It just took longer than expected and cost more than anyone should have to pay. The morning after opening night, Maya found an envelope slipped under the restaurant's door. Inside was a child's drawing, a figure in a chef's hat surrounded by swirls of color that might have been steam or magic. The note, in a 9-year-old's careful printing, read, "Thank you for the best dinner ever. The soup tasted like a hug. Love, Micah." His parents must have helped him find the address, must have sensed something in their son's reaction worth nurturing. Maya held the drawing like the treasure it was, this first bridge across years of separation. She framed it and hung it in her office next to her mother's photo and the first review that had called her a genius who cooks like she's translating secrets from another world. But the drawing mattered more than any critic's praise. It was proof that some connections survived even the harshest severing, that love could be tasted in a perfectly balanced broth, that promises made by desperate children could bloom into miracles given enough time and tears and determination. In a world quick to judge by appearances, have you ever wondered how many dreams we walk past every day?